time ago, I did an interview for an organization called Reads Rainbow, which was a blog looking for LGBT writers. And I was like, hi, I'm one. So I did this interview, and now I learned how to read at 3. Instead of preschool social skills development, I lived in and for books. I have early memories of scrawling elaborate stories in composition notebooks. When I entered a public junior high, I had no concept of how to even dress or relate, kind of still don't. After finishing Catherine John's Geek Love, I started my first novel on an early DOS computer. I had an encouraging English teacher, Gary Atwood. Hi, unless you're dead. Who said wonderful things about my odd poems, convincing me I had literary potential. Writing became something to live for. I enjoy reading poetry, especially current stuff in online magazines by the next generation of writers, which I'm really enjoying. I used to write venting beat influenced poetry. My book of poems and lists was published as a Swedish collaboration 10 years ago. Some of it, or some of my other poems, are in online magazines through the years. I've given the abject failure of trying to publish my second book of poetry, which I finished around 2006, 4, 5, something like that. I gave up on poetry for now, just kind of crushed. There are a lot better poets than I emerging. I went to the theater since I was old enough to sit still in Mary Jane's Shakespeare saturation. Studied Denton in Artaud in grad school. When the schizophrenic voices in my head, because I have schizoaffective disorder, became loud and constant, I wrote a bunch of psychotic break plays where the voices in my head assumed different characters. One I performed alone on this very YouTube channel. It's called FBI again. Really? Now, I write almost exclusively creative nonfiction. That's what I write gets published now. I've been called myself, mistress of the trauma porn personal essay. Apparently, this mentally deranged, biracial cult queer widow identity is so niche, marginalized. I don't know. But there's a market for it. I have so much pain to share. My only novel that is published, I've written a lot of other ones that haven't been published, is A Drug Downfall in San Francisco's Millennial Discos. I wrote a series of manuscripts, other novels, about living in other cities and times, but they languish unpublished. Now that I'm sober, I write a monthly food column for Entropy magazine. It's a food section called Dining with the Cursed Bloodline. Nip slips and lesbian sex with delicious meals. Out last Monday of the month. I am firmly against the trope of insane, disfigured, or otherwise disabled villains, and that indicating villainy. Assumed evil because of this blameless illness or disability. Especially mentally ill murderers, because I am mentally ill. That's not how I do things. I take that especially personally because it just triggers me. I mean, it is such a damaging, prevalent message. Absolutely false in real life. In 2004, I wrote for a porn website, kind of a MySpace suicide girls project, Sex Work Light. The male editor asked me to write a scene where a woman got her boyfriend to play act a stranger rape. It was like rape erotica, which I drafted the request, but I couldn't stand behind such a dangerous message. Pushed not to publish the article, so the editor pulled it. I still throw consensual sex scenes into my work, but I will never write a rape again. That was just. Trauma in cultural zeitgeist. My novel, the published one, Jets at Desolate, was written during polysubstance rock bottom while subsisting on unemployment and severance. I had time, with ambition, to quit being a co-core. Bipolar mania and insomnia are less damaging when funneled into massive creative projects, like writing books or YouTube. When mania ends, I go catatonic and binge watch American Horror Story, among other things. It's taught me a lot about plot arcs. Well, as Cardi B says, I've been through some things. Inspiration for creative nonfiction comes from daily life, emotions, pain, and pleasure. My biker butch fiance is a potent muse. For being with her and hearing her wild stories, I get ideas. Splice them with savant memory for quotes, processing trauma and writing therapy, and a compulsive coping mechanism. For some reason, strangers are interested in reading my dolled up therapy sessions, which, yay! I'm a bit excessive with the Spotify playlists, admittedly. Every book I've written has its own. I reference music a lot when I'm writing. Pay more attention to lyrics. I mean, they're like poetry in a different way. I listen to a lot of Lana Del Rey for that sort of sad girl vibe. Feminist hip hop for energy and passion and strength. The writing process lately is see call for submissions within one of my niches, online usually or on Twitter somewhere. Mental gears start turning. I drink some cold black coffee or an energy drink. When symptoms permit, my illnesses, I sit or lay down with my laptop and pound out a stream of consciousness draft. Revise it so as to be almost unrecognizable from original. I read the piece aloud over and over to catch awkward phrasing, little errors, spell check. I like to end with a brutal, devastating one liner. After decades of bad experiences with MFA critiques, no offense, you guys were awesome, but no. Writing groups, beta readers, and other layfolk, some who were great, some who just, it's subjective. But some people would condemn my books morally for the mental illness, sexuality, and or deviant lifestyle. I mean, I'm aware this isn't for everyone, and neither am I. So now, now that I'm old and fed up and fragile, I just show my specific editors for the piece at the magazine my drafts, and I take all of their edits. I leave it to the professionals. Um, I've offered to show things to my partner, but she really prefers to see the finished work. So she's rather read the column when it's published. Haunting museums in the future. I can't has apocalypse. Okay, thanks. Bye. Renee, Diane DePrimo, and William S. Burroughs. Alejandro Jodorowsky. That good old saw, right what you know, was drilled into me in 90s creative writing classes. Writing solely about the sexualities, which I'm familiar with, became natural. I don't really know how straight adults live, especially the married ones. That's not my past. I came out as bisexual when I was 15. I guess they call it pansexual now. I was a cis femme almost by default, not having other options, being born in the 70s. Queer for my entire adult life. All of these new sexual orientations and genders I read about on Twitter, I'm like, that's fascinating. That's awesome. Good for you. But I would never presume to write from those perspectives. That's for those people to write from. There are many talented writers of all possible genders who can write their own stories, and not me. I can only write my own. They should be published instead. I'll write about a widowed lesbian who fell on a couple million cocks along the way and then finally found love again. Wonderful non-binary partner. Andrew Holleran's Dancer from the Dance. This one's really good. Ali Liebegot's The IHOP Papers. This is an old one, but Valencia by Michelle T. Classic. And The Tales of the City series by Somerset Maugham, which I know is on Netflix now. Yay. I should have signed that Random House of Canada contract giving them all rights to my future writing. This was when I was a teenager. I submitted a poem to their anthology, just kind of as one does as a teenager. I wasn't, and they sent me this contract, and they wanted everything. But my parents wouldn't let me sign the contract. They said, "Oh, you might want to publish somewhere else." So basically, I lost a golden chance to have everything I've written, all of this huge backlog now that I can't get published by because of Big Five Press in another country. So, I mean, the published stuff is only the tip of the iceberg of what I write on my own time. So I'm still salty about that, even like 30 years later. I mean, this whole brutal struggle to do the work, get established, get it out there would have gone a lot smoother had I signed that contract. Matthias Wegner, Michael Sminter, I haven't seen in a decade.